Last month, the Market Theatre issued a statement announcing the conclusion of the disciplinary hearing process instituted against 5 staff members earlier this year. According to the statement, 4 staff members, CEO Ismail Mahomed, CFO Christine McDonald, Brand and Communications Manager Zama Buthelezi, and Senior Publicist Lusanda Zokufa were found not guilty at the disciplinary hearing process chaired by independent Labour experts. While following this and the challenges facing the institution, the president of the African Cultural Policy Network and award-winning playwright Mike van Graan penned a piece titled Market Theatre, Yet Another Victim of State Capture. While Mike joins us now from our Seapoint studios in a series of interviews as we try and get to the bottom of what really happened at the Market Theatre. A very good morning to you, Mike. Thank you so much for making the time to come on the show today. Now, as someone who's been in the theatre space for as many years as you have, and given what we currently know about state capture, where do you think it all went wrong or started to go wrong for the Market Theatre?
Well, I think that's a very good question, because in the early 90s, when we were lobbying for new arts and culture policies for this country, the principle of arm's length was a very profound one. And we had learned from the apartheid era, where what happened was that the National Party government appointed the boards of publicly funded institutions and then also appointed the chairpersons of those boards. And because those chairpersons were directly accountable to politicians, they had power which other members of the board did not have, and they were able to exert authority within those institutions which otherwise would not have been the case. And I think that what also happened with an organization like CAPE at the time, the Cape Performing Arts Board, the drama department staged a play that was critical of the apartheid government, and the chairperson of that board basically banned the play. And based on that experience, we said that, in a post-apartheid, more democratic dispensation, the government should appoint these boards independently, and the boards should really elect their chairperson so that the chairperson is accountable to the board of the institution rather than to a politician. And that was the case for the first part of the early 90s and until about 2000, when the law was changed. And now the minister basically appoints the board and the chairpersons of these boards, as well as each of these publicly funded institutions having to declare that they are agencies of the Department of Arts and Culture. So the principle of freedom of expression and the independence of these organizations has, to a large extent, kind of been compromised. So that's really where it all began.
Let's speak about the role of the Minister, Nathi Mthethwa, or what you think his role could be, and perhaps maybe some of the biggest contributors to the downfall of the institutions. I know you mentioned who boards should be accountable to and how they should be brought into these spaces. But just quickly expand on us on particularly the role of the Minister.
Okay, so now we come to the more recently defined understanding of state capture, where essentially publicly funded institutions are in a way captured by individuals who have more their self-interest at heart than the broader interest that these institutions are supposed to serve. So what happened was that prior to the appointment of the current CEO, Ismail Mahomed, Annabelle Lebete was the CEO of the Market Theatre. And she came into conflict with the then chairperson of the council, who had been appointed by the Minister of Arts and Culture, Nathi Mthethwa. And she had basically tried to put a stop to him corruptly and fraudulently using the resources of the Market Theatre to hire cars, for example, for his own personal business, and then he would basically assign the costs to the Market Theatre. And as a result of her standing in his way of accessing the public resources, he basically maneuvered her out. And she, together with other folk, had written to the minister prior to the reappointment of the board in April last year and said, please make sure that the people that you appoint to the board are not compromised in any way. And the current CEO and the CFO had also written to the minister to say, this guy had wanted to assign himself a 100,000 Rand bonus as the chairperson of the board and his fellow council members to receive 75,000. And they basically stopped this and said this was not consistent with the Public Finance Management Act and Treasury regulations, which they were responsible for. The minister went ahead and reappointed the previous board anyway, and reappointed the council chairperson. And so when the council chairperson came back into power, as it were, he then tried to make sure that the CFO and the CEO, who had stood in his way in the past, would basically have their services terminated. And that's where the crisis in the market theatre really began, because then the CFO and the CEO felt that their jobs were under threat, and they had tried all of the right channels, going to the board, going to the council, going to the audit committee, going to the minister, going to the Department of Arts and Culture, had not helped them in any way. They had just not been listened to. And eventually they went to the media, and City Press, basically posted a big story, and out of this, the whole kind of crisis emerged. And eventually a forensic investigation was appointed into what was happening there. And on the basis of that investigation, charges were laid against these 5 folk that you just mentioned earlier. But also on the basis of that investigation, the minister eventually kind of pulled the chairperson of the council off the board and reappointed or appointed new members to the board. So clearly, on the basis of that forensic investigation, the minister realized that he had made a mistake by appointing the council chairperson, which he should not have done in the first place.
Mike, unfortunately, we are out of time, and that as well, I'd leave it. I would have loved to ask you about what you think are some of the solutions or immediate solutions that can be implemented to just make this institution and other institutions corruption-free. But perhaps that is a discussion for another day. Mike van Graan is the president of the African Cultural Policy Network and an award-winning playwright with 33 plays under his belt, helping us to dissect the going-ons at the market theatre in a series of interviews that we will be conducting over the next few weeks as we zoom in on art institutions and how they are run. So a discussion is still to come in the future. That is where we'll leave it for the moment. A quick ad break. We'll be back with more here on Morning Live.